Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from FantasyFootballScout.co.uk. My name is David and today we are going to be looking at one of the most exciting parts of fantasy football, and that is penalties and who is taking them at each of the 20 Premier League teams ahead of the new campaign. A lot of this is up in the air at the moment, and we're getting a lot of questions from people asking who's taking the penalties here, who's taking the penalties there, and so we thought it was a good opportunity to run through all the different teams and help you understand what it is that you need to look out for in the pre-season especially, but also perhaps pieces of information from last season that can maybe answer that question without the need to look at pre-season. But as I said, there is a lot up in the air. A lot of this information is going to be, as I said, pointing you guys towards what to look out for in the pre-season. And so that is a good opportunity for me, before we get started in earnest, to just highlight the benefits of Fantasy Football Scout membership. And if you sign up now, you can save up to 30% with the pre-season prices. One of the key crown jewels of this membership is, of course, full access to the pre-season minutes tracker, which is part of the world-leading pre-season guide for all teams, where we are going to be following every single match in the pre-season, tracking how many minutes each player is playing, what position they're playing in, what their role is in the set pieces, corners, free kicks, crucially, penalties as well. And you'll get full access to that if you have membership. If you don't have the membership, there's limited access to that. So if you want to make sure that you're discovering the key talking points, the best players in budget positions who are going to start games before your friends, so you can beat them in your mini leagues, now is the time to sign up for that membership. So let's start with Arsenal then. Now, we're not actually going to do this in alphabetical format, even if we have actually started with Arsenal. This is all based on some fantastic research and a fantastic article written by Neil Rigg, the editor of Fantasy Football Scout. If you want to read it in full, you can head to fantasyfootballscout.co.uk and read that on the website. And what he's done is he's chunked some of these teams into different sections with recurring themes. And what we're starting with is two teams whose takers were backed after they missed some key penalties. Now, Saka is the first of those at Arsenal, and he failed to score from the spot in April. But, however, Arteta has been very unequivocal in terms of just, this guy's taking our penalties. When asked if he was going to remain on penalties, he said yes, and if not, I will go on the pitch and throw him the ball and make sure he takes the next one. So, does not get more exciting for Saka, I suppose, than that, to be told, even when you miss a penalty, the manager is just going to run on the pitch and tell you, you're taking the next one. And so that is quite useful when we are considering who the best Arsenal midfielder is, or just Arsenal attacker in general. The fact that Saka is on penalties to that extent, that Arteta is that confident that he should be taking them, that is, of course, a feather in his bow. So the other team is Liverpool. And so this one is kind of an obvious one, isn't it? Mohamed Salah famously taking spot kicks for Liverpool for some time now. Now, he missed two of his penalties in a row, Game Week 27 and Game Week 30, but he was rewarded by Klopp. He, with some faith in me, said, you can take the next one and the next one. And so after two misses in a row, it was then two goals in a row from the penalties, and it was double game week 34, I should say, when he achieved that. And we got a quote from Jurgen Klopp where he said this after those two penalties. Obviously, he wanted to stay the penalty taker, but we had a normal conversation about it. This today was a super penalty, that is really clear. So I think with all the goals Mo scored, we cannot just judge it with two missed to go away from it, by which he means Salah taking the penalties. It was a conversation between two grown-up men. Well, thank you for reminding us of the mature nature of that conversation, Jurgen. So, yes, Salah very much is still on penalties from what we can tell. Now, there have been rumblings, of course, that there could be a conversation further to that to be had, because McAllister, who took Brighton's penalties last season, has joined Liverpool. He's got a good record from the spot. And Szoboszlai as well has a relatively enviable record from 12 yards also. And so they're kind of in the conversation, and you may find people worried about whether or not the impact on Salah. We aren't seeing anything at the moment that would suggest that Salah has to restake his claim, but of course the pre-season will help us see on that front. Watch out for penalties that Liverpool get when Salah is on the pitch, and if we see Szoboszlai or McAllister involved, then it's time to panic. But for now, we think we can be relatively happy. Now, Section 2 is named Nailed Penalty Takers, but ... And so that is penalty takers that we know for certain, dead certain, take penalties in their teams, But it's not quite as simple as that. So we will start with Brentford because, of course, Ivan Toney is the most nailed-on penalty taker in the division, other than probably Harry Kane, who we're going to talk about in a minute. But of course, he's suspended. He's not going to kick a ball until January, which means for now it looks as if Brian Mbeumo is going to be taking the penalties at Brentford. Now, he twice deputised for Toney in the last 2 seasons, including Gameweek 15 of the most recent campaign. And so from what we can see so far, it looks like Mbeumo is taking those penalties because he's the only one who's got anywhere near spot kicks in a world with Brentford, I should say, with Toney. So Mbeumo very much looks like nailed on there, and that is, of course, a big part of his appeal when people are deciding between Mbeumo and Visser. Visser, of course, is more likely to play the centre-forward role than Mbeumo. Mbeumo is more likely to take the penalties. Now, Harry Kane, what's the caveat there? Well, that is, of course, the fact that we don't know what club he's going to play for next season. So he is the most locked-on penalty taker in the Premier League, if not the world, for their club. But if he's not there, what happens next? Well, that is an important question and something that pre-season will have to answer for us because, of course, that will tell us where Kane's going to be. If he does leave, that will tell us who's taking the penalties. Now, there's some interesting numbers here in the fact that Son's penalty record is actually not very good. So his career spot kick record, he's only scored 7 from 12. That's a success rate of 58.3%. His most recent penalty, this is Son, came in April 2021. The last person to deputise for a Harry Kane penalty outside of that was, get this, Dele Alli, and it has been some time since he was a Tottenham player. And so it could potentially defer to some of these other names, and some of these are very interesting from an FPL perspective. As I said, this is all in a context where Kane leaves the club, so it's all if, buts and maybes. But James Maddison, 7.5 million in FPL, and a lot of people are looking at him as a potential inclusion in a Game Week 3 mini wildcard based on his price and Spurs' fixture turn. 6 penalties from 8 for him. Richarlison, 7 million midfielder, and tipped by some to be the centre-forward replacement for Harry Kane if Kane does leave. 7 penalties from 8 in his career. Dejan Kulusevski, 7 million also, 3 penalties from 3. And Pedro Porro, the 5 million defender, has taken 3 penalties in his career and scored all 3 of them. Now, from those 4 names, you would imagine that Richarlison and Maddison are probably the more likely of those 4 to get near them. But it's just nice, isn't it, to talk about a penalty scoring defender, right? That just gets everybody's juices flowing. So I thought I'd just let you guys know that that's a possibility so that we can all get very excited about Spurs this year. And of course, I mean, maybe it just also is just another reason perhaps to consider Pedro Porro at 5 million. He does look like a very good pick anyway. And could he be on penalties? Well, you heard it here first. And it might never happen, but it's fun to talk about. So let's talk about now the probable first choice takers, and these are clubs where for the most part we're relatively confident of who it's going to be. Bournemouth, Burnley, Everton, Man United, Newcastle, Nottingham Forest and West Ham. Let's start with Man United. So Bruno Fernandes, he seems to be the first choice taker at Man United as things stand. Although we say seems because he did take a step back and allow a couple of other people to take some spot kicks last season. So Martial took one in Game Week 10, and then Rashford took one in the FA Cup third round. We, having gone back and looked at those, very much describe those as low pressure penalties. And so if we've got penalties in bigger games and bigger things on the line, then Fernandes seems to be the one to go. So Fernandes has taken all 4 of the last penalties that United were awarded after that Rashford one we just mentioned. Scored all of them. The last of those was in the FA Cup final in June. And of course, Rashford was on the pitch for all of those. And so we're like 95% certain it's Fernandes taking them. Martial, of course, took the Game Week 10 one. Martial wasn't actually on the pitch for any of those other 4 that Fernandes took, but, you know, Martial, United, you know, it's just, you're not going to go there for FPL. And the appeal that Fernandes has, even outside of the penalties from assist potential and his long-range threat, is probably still good enough anyway. And as I said, we're 95% certain that it's him. We'd be very shocked if Martial was going to get involved. So, West Ham next. Bowen missed some in the early part of last season, so he very much dropped down the pecking order. Manuel Lanzini was previously the first choice, but didn't feature much last season. He had that very bad injury, I think, the year before. He's now left on a free transfer, and so it is very much Saeed Benrahma who is the first choice at the moment. He took 4 of West Ham's 5 penalties in 22-23, and Paqueta was the one to take that other one. That was in game week 19, but that, of course, was when Benrahma was benched, so that is very much why that happened. Now, we have seen the opportunity for West Ham to take penalties in Europe as well, so that's additional high-pressure games for them. And Paqueta did actually take one other one in Europe, so he took one in game week 19, and when Benrahma was on the field. But we got this quote from Moyes, which largely sets the record straight. So he said, "It probably would have been Saeed. They must have had a good discussion because Paqueta scored. I thought he was walking away because there is a trend at the moment for the person who is not taking it to walk away from the ball. So I had no panic on." And of course, after that, in the Europa League final as well, Benrahma took a penalty and scored. High pressure moment. Very much the important number one penalty taker. So 6 million for him, 1 million cheaper than Bowen. West Ham's fixtures aren't too nice at the start of the season, but they do turn later on around game weeks 6, 7, 8 and 9. So maybe that could be a time. It's enough time for you to watch West Ham and see if Benrahma offers enough in open play for you to consider him. So yeah, let's see on that front. So a couple of other teams to run through. Bournemouth, they didn't get a single penalty last season. I don't know if you know, I didn't know that until I read Neil's article. So there we are. Sorry about that, Cherries. Hopefully we'll get some more this time around, because Dominic Solanke, 6.5 million, he very much appears to be their penalty taker. He took all 5 in their promotion-winning campaign of 21-22. Everton, it was Dominic Calvert-Lewin previously, of course. Now, he didn't play very much last season. He did return from injury to score one of Everton's penalties in game week 34. In that time, Damari Gray was the one who was deputising. He's 5.5 million. If Calvert-Lewin does get injured in the pre-season and you really want to capitalise on Everton's really nice fixtures in the first 4, Damari Gray takes their penalties. Calvert-Lewin, if he stays fit, also probably worth looking at. We've done a video on him on our YouTube channel and on podcast platforms as well, perhaps arguing that he's maybe being a little bit overlooked. And of course, penalties also in the conversation for him. At a similar price point, but in a different position, Morgan Gibbs-White is taking penalties, we think, at the moment for Nottingham Forest. So it was Brennan Johnson, but he missed 2 in a row. And so it then switched to Gibbs-White, formerly of Wolves, and he scored the last 2 in a row. The literal inversion of what Johnson had done with his 2 most recent penalty kicks. Newcastle, there had been some confusion / division here, because Isak and Wilson had been sharing penalty taking responsibility for them, but the problem was that neither of them had been on the pitch at the same time for penalties until double game week 36. When that finally happened, once Eddie Howe was prepared to actually put them on the pitch at the same time, it was Wilson who cemented his position at the top of the tree in the 2-2 draw with Leeds, scoring 2 times in that game from 12 yards, whilst Isak was also on the pitch. So Wilson very much the penalty taker at Newcastle. Finally then, in this little section, is Burnley. We know that Jay Rodriguez took both of Burnley's penalties last season that he was on the field for. He has 22 penalties scored from 24 in his career. But the question now really is going to be how much he's going to play this season. He turns 34 this month, and Ashley Barnes has left as well. So we think that they're probably going to be hoping to buy a new centre forward. Could they end up on the penalties? That is the question. Right, the next section is entitled Back Off Riyadh. And anybody who owned Erling Haaland this season, which by the way is all of you, will be very frustrated at the times when other people took penalties at Man City. But from what we can tell, it should be more straightforward this year because of some of the things that Pep Guardiola has said. So, Haaland's record from the spot, of course, is very good. I don't know if you know this, but he's actually very good at putting the ball in the net. So he took and scored 7 Premier League penalties last season. But Mahrez stood up to take one against Villa earlier on in the season. It was around February, and Haaland was on the pitch, of course. And then against Leeds in May, Gundogan took one. Now, he was chasing a hat-trick, so he had 2 goals already, and he actually missed. And so those 2 penalties had made people in the fantasy Premier League community perhaps submit a complaint to the Manchester City HR department that was fed through to Guardiola, who reiterated that Haaland very much is the first choice. So let's read through this quote, because it's quite a detailed one. And I always enjoy detailed quotes from Guardiola because he is a bit of a genius. So he said, who knows if Erling takes the penalty and misses? What happens if Riyad takes the penalty and misses? What happens if İlkay Gündoğan takes the penalty and scores? The question is, if it's 2-0, who is the taker? The taker is Erling, or Riyad has to take it. Second point is that it shows how Erling is as a person. He wants to score goals, but at the same time, he understands that his teammates are also important. He had chances to score, he didn't convert, but at the same time, he was outstanding. But at 2-0, especially in England, the game is never over. I wanted the taker, by which he means Haaland, to take it. They have more routine and specialists. That means if Erling or Riyad take a penalty, he is going to score. Maybe not. Who knows? At 2-0, you have to close it. You don't have to give anything. If you can control, you have to control. Saying that Gundo could have scored, other ones could have missed. It's not about that. I admire that Gundo wanted to take the responsibility to take the penalty. That is the best value as a player. Normally, the taker is the taker. Erling has to take it. He is the specialist. Now, that quote kind of meandered all over the place, but in effect, what he's basically trying to say is that he obviously appreciates that Haaland has the mental qualities to look out for his teammates and give them the opportunity to score goals as well. But he's also saying that when you're 2-0 up, it doesn't matter, right? In England, 2-0 up can be a dangerous scoreline. I'm pretty sure we even have some kind of weird cliche about how 2-0 is the most dangerous lead in football. And so he very much is of the opinion that the taker should be taking it. And Mahrez is still in the conversation because he previously had been taking penalties, but it's Haaland who gets name dropped more and more in there. So it does sound as if we can be a little bit more secure on Haaland taking the penalties this time. Gündoğan has actually left as well, so that removes him from the situation in terms of missing penalties potentially. Now, speaking of missing penalties, we now come to the serial missers of the penalty category, and we will find them at Aston Villa, Crystal Palace and Fulham. And we've got a very unenviable looking table on the screen right now, so just describe that for the benefit of the podcast listeners, which is detailing the penalties missed at Aston Villa, Palace and Fulham over the last season and the career penalty record of those takers. So we'll start with Watkins at Villa. He took 2 penalties last season and missed one of them, but actually you may remember his record in previous campaigns in the Premier League especially wasn't too good, and therefore his overall career penalty record is he's only scored 4 penalties from a possible 9. Zaha at Palace, he missed both of the penalties that he took last season and has missed 7 from 11 in his career. And then Mitrovic is the very worst of the lot. He took 8 penalties last season, missed 4 of them, and in his career, he has only scored 25 from a possible 37. I mean, it's wow. It's for someone who's very, very good at scoring from open play. It's incredible how bad he is at penalties by comparison. So, yeah, it actually made Premier League history, Mitrovic, by missing more penalties than any other player in one season. And, the quote from Marco Silva after that game, it's really interesting. He's basically been asked whether or not he would still be Fulham's taker for the next season. He said, "It's a fact," of course referring to the fact that he's now missed 4 penalties. "Against the facts, we cannot talk, nothing more. It's up to us to keep working with him in this situation, and if another one he has to take, he's going to take it for sure. We're talking about 2 to 3 months." He means until the next season. "I have enough time to think about these situations and prepare with the players." Now, mixed signals, because he seems quite, bullish about the fact that he's going to take the next one. But then he's also like, I've got some time to think about what we do. And he has options here. Andreas Pereira scored a penalty when Mitrovic was absent last season. Of course, he had that ban. And so is there a possibility that maybe he moves up the pecking order? Possibly. His record from penalties is a little bit better than Mitrovic, so we could see that. At 5.5 million, he is of course $1 million more expensive than last time out when he was very much the 4.5 million midfielder of choice, but getting a 5.5 million penalty taking midfielder in a team that does like to score a fair amount of goals and has some tricky wingers as well, potentially to win some penalties, that actually could be quite appealing, to be honest, for the campaign. So Crystal Palace then, let's look at them in more detail. So Zaha, as we know, his penalty record is not amazing, but the thing is that we think that it's already shifting in a different direction at Palace. We kind of feel like Eze is probably the new penalty taker because he didn't step up to take Palace's penalty against West Ham in April, and it was Eze that took it. Whilst Zaha was on the pitch, he scored it as well. So that's what we think seems likely, but Roy Hodgson has kind of tried to temper our enthusiasm a little bit. He said, I think Zaha's dead leg probably did influence the decision for Eze to take the penalty. I must speak to them. I think he probably did. Eze's good. We've got some good penalty takers. Elise is a good penalty taker as well. And took a penalty at Wolves. And that would have been Luka Milivojevic. So we're not short of takers. But I still need to speak to them on Monday and find out what went on between them. I was pleased to see it now. Milivojevic, obviously not in the penalty conversation anymore for Palace, really. Elise, maybe. Eze is very much, I think, on the way to becoming Palace's new talisman, especially in a world where Zaha could be on his way out of Crystal Palace. So I personally feel like Eze is probably the one to go for there. He had a very good end to the season, and I've seen him in a few drafts, but he's a bit of a differential, so yeah, could do quite well. As for Aston Villa, Watkins, you have to feel bad for him in some respects because he's clearly not a penalty taker. We can see that from his record, but they lost El Ghazi and Ings, who had previously been taking spot kicks for them, and so as the centre forward, he probably felt duty bound, and maybe the managers did as well. But he might be in luck. He might maybe be able to step away from them because Villa have, of course, signed Yuri Tielemans, and you would imagine he's going to start games because he is a very good player, got European experience as well, and he's very good from the spot. Now, there was a time when he was taking penalties at the same time as Jamie Vardy at Leicester, so that's how much he's used to walking into a team and being like, do you know what, I might take the penalty today, guys. So that's useful. His record is very good, so 7 penalties from 7 at Leicester, and in the most recent campaign he got 2 and he scored them both, and his overall career record is 24 from 29, but the vast majority of those misses were pre-Leicester, of course, because at Leicester it was 7 from 7 and 2 from 2 last season. So we do think Yuri Tielemans could be on penalties at Villa moving forward, just based purely on the fact that El Ghazi and Ings were very much the key takers before they left. Watkins was the only one who really went anywhere near replacing them as the taker, and the reason we say anywhere near rather than calling him the taker is because Marzel does not have a penalty, right, if you're going to miss him at that sort of frequency. So it should be very easy for Tielemans to take that one over. Now, the next category is called Up for Grabs, and this is probably the most interesting one, and this is where you guys need to be keeping an eye on pre-season and make sure you use the pre-season guide with Fantasy Football Scout because there's lots up in the air. Now, Brighton last season, they had McAllister, of course. He's now left the club. He scored 6 from 6, which leaves the following list of people in the conversation for penalties. Now, Gross, we would say, probably has the advantage because he has taken them before, but we've got Gross on 11 from 15 in his career. We've got Milner now at Brighton, 30 penalties from 35. Welbeck has scored 3 from 4. Estupiñán, yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, you heard that right. Estupiñán has scored 6 penalties from 6 in his career. He's taken a few for his country. And Ciso 3 from 3, Ferguson 2 from 2, and Gilmore 9 from 11. As we said, Gross is the favourite there, and of course that is because he's taken them before. He's probably the one who's going to be on the pitch the most because he's a very versatile player who can play even at wing-back, play in a deeper midfield role, can play number 10, can play on the wings. And so versus all of those guys, he's the most likely to be on the pitch, perhaps alongside Estupiñán. But do keep an eye on the preseason just in case any of those guys steps up because, of course, penalties is a big facet of that conversation about which Brighton midfielder do you have because Matoma and March very much not in this conversation. They offer different things. Matoma is a left winger who's very much all about goal scoring. March is a right winger who's all about creativity. And then Gross is someone who can play in attacking positions, can do well creating from deep, could potentially be a wing back, could potentially be the penalty taker. Take penalties away from Gross, probably pushes things more towards Matoma and March if you want a 6.5, or in Ciso if you want to save some money. So do keep an eye on whether or not Gross can nail down penalties. Now, another club that has lost its taker of late is Chelsea. We didn't see them get too many penalties last year. Jorginho took 2 from 2 before he left and joined Arsenal. Havertz scored 1 from 1 before he also followed his ex-colleague to Arsenal. And so that is leaving a big void. We think that Nkunku is probably going to be the one to take them over, especially when you consider the record of the other people involved. He has scored 8 penalties from a total of 9 in his career. Sterling has missed 4 of the 8 that he's been awarded. Mudryk has missed 3 of the 8 that he's been awarded. So out of 16 penalties between Sterling and Mudryk, just the 9 scored. Madueke, 6 from 9. Enzo, 5 from 5, which is pretty good. But of course, Nkunku, we think, is going into this team to score goals. So I would still perhaps put Nkunku ahead there, but let's not rule out Enzo, of course. Jorginho was a midfielder of a similar ilk and took them. And then Reece James has scored 1 penalty from 2. We would be remiss in our duty if we didn't point out that he is in the conversation, but we will be very surprised if he's taking spot kicks, perhaps with Enzo and Nkunku around. Luton is another one, and so it's a lot of learning to do, I suppose, here for us, because this is a team that's not been in the Premier League before. Adebayo had been towards the front of the queue at Luton, but he's missed 3 of the 7 Championship penalties that he's taken over the last 2 seasons. Both Adebayo and backup striker Cauley Woodrow had missed from 12 yards in 22-23 before top scorer Carlton Morris was handed the opportunity in Gameweek 44 of the campaign just gone. And so he's 5.5, and he's actually in the conversation for cheap third forward for some people. So yeah, it's very much worth pointing out that he is looking to be the penalty taker there. Now, Sheffield United then. Penalty taking was not really all that fun for them last season. They only got 2, and Norwood missed 1 and Brewster missed the other. And the suggestion from Heckingbottom was that Sander Berge could be the one to take the next one. And so he said, after Norwood missed a penalty in August, it's just been a long-standing all the time I've been here. Long-standing problem. I've been here all the time. The penalties. If Billy Sharp was on, he'd have taken it. Then Ollie Norwood, and then Sander is next in line. So I think Sander will have his hand up now. And he's only ever taken 1 penalty, though, is the thing. He did score it, but it's we don't really know what's going to happen there with the penalties, really. And finally, then, Wolves, who I'm sure you're very excited to hear about who's taking their penalties. Now, Neves has left for Saudi Arabia, and we are expecting Jimenez to leave, and so we haven't put their numbers up. They have been involved in them before. Sarabia actually has an incredible penalty record. He has scored 16 penalties from a possible 16, so he could inherit them. Of course, we just need to see how often he's going to start. Of course, it's pre-season 4 as well. There's a lot up in the air about that Wolves starting lineup. And then Hwang has scored 7 from a possible 9. Sarabia, I would argue, is probably ahead in that one. If you're interested in a Wolves penalty taker, and if you are, let us know. We want to hear from people who are interested in that, because we can maybe have you stuffed and hung on the wall just for posterity. So just let us know. So that brings us to the end of the list of penalty takers. I hope that was useful for you, and hopefully it gives you a few pointers and things to look out for in the pre-season. And just another reminder, of course, to sort out your membership right now. Save up to 30% on those pre-season prices and make the most of the pre-season coverage that we are going to have on Fantasy Football Scout. Make sure you like this video and subscribe as well to the YouTube channel, and hit that bell notification so you don't miss any content. And just giving us the like and the subscribe and things like that helps us know what content you like best, so we can make more of it. And of course, it is absolutely free. Now, with that, I will leave you guys to the rest of your tinkering, and I will see you next time.